Hi, future bureaucrats of India. This is Arjun R. Shaankar and welcome to Learn Stroke. Today we thought I'll take you to a very important session for your civil service preparation, especially prelims and mains. And that section is something that we call as Simply Simplified, which is the current affairs review for civil service examination. Every aspirant who prepares for civil services, whether he is actually going to write the exam in 1 year, or whether he's studying in college, whether he's in school, whether you are a civil service aspirant, current affairs review is something that everybody wants. And that's why we have created something called as Simply Simplified, which is going to be an analysis of daily newspaper. That means newspapers like Hindu, Indian Express, and the most important, the articles that feature in this newspaper are being decoded, are being reviewed in this section called as Simply Simplified. So basically, I'm going to give you an analysis of important articles which came in today's newspaper. So let's quickly get into Simply Simplified. And yes, this Simply Simplified, this review, you're doing it with me, Arjun R. Shankar. And I'm the founder and editor of LearnStroke. You can read more about me. I'm super passionate about current affairs, answer writing, mentoring, history, etc. So read more about that. Okay, let's find out the first article that appeared in today's newspaper is regarding an important topic called as an oxygen audit. The newspaper was talking about an oxygen audit when Supreme Court of India, such questions are very, very important for, say, law, governance, and health governance, questions for health governance, such terms such as oxygen audit are very important. This is an important item that we picked out from the today's news. So they want to talk about a new formula. Supreme Court talk about a new formula on oxygen supply, and they ask a very important question regarding, are we prepared for a third wave? Because we are talking about COVID wave 1, wave 2, and are we prepared for a third wave is a question. And the Supreme Court is actually asking regarding the distribution of oxygen. Very, very important, because we have seen the shortage of oxygen in many states and many parts of India, and how people are struggling to get oxygen. So they have actually questioned the distribution of oxygen and what is the formula. Supreme Court is actually asking a formula, and they are asking the formula, do we have a scientific formula or a scientific basis? Does that formula have a scientific basis? And the Supreme Court even says that you should have a scientific basis or a formula containing the distribution of oxygen systems is concerned in India. And the rough and ready model, that is something that we have. The rough and ready model of distribution of oxygen will not help in distributing oxygen in the right manner, because that is an important analysis that they have made. The rough and ready model will not work. You need a scientific formula, and for that, Supreme Court says that in India you should have something called as an oxygen audit. Very, very important point. That is when we say that we need to have an oxygen audit. So that is what this summary of this article basically talks about. And they also talk about the third wave. How are we prepared for the third wave? So for third wave, having a very scientific formula, oxygen supply is definitely something that will keep everything prepared, because a lot of people suffering with COVID have lung problems and difficulty to breathe. So a good oxygen audit will give you how much oxygen do we actually need. And this not only requires about that oxygen needed in the people who are in the hospitals. No, what about this? Maybe the formula only assumes or enumerates the people who are in the hospitals and who need oxygen. What about the people who are suffering in the homes, who are actually in quarantine, home quarantine? So have we included them? So all these questions are something that Supreme Court talks about. And they talk about the third wave. As I told you, it's better that we do an oxygen audit right now, because oxygen audit will help us to analyze how much distribution we need for people. And this is for the third wave, and Supreme Court even wants that what are we doing for the children? Are we creating enough mechanisms to vaccinate them, or what are the vaccines available for them? Because children are the most vulnerable section as far as the third wave is concerned. So Supreme Court normally enumerates about how prepared are we. So this is the important analysis of this article, which is called as Supreme Court's want formula on oxygen supply ahead of the third wave. So let's take a sorry, let's take a quick important points that we just discussed. It talks about oxygen allocation on the states and the supply of the third wave. Children are the most vulnerable, and as you can just see, they talk about this. Do we have the scientific manner or the formula which we say? Do we have the scientific manner formula? And the next is rough and ready formula is something that is will not work anymore, and the current allocation of formula is already underestimated. And what about the people who have been asked to stay at home quarantine? This is a question that I asked. And something here which is called as the oxygen audit is very, very important. So rough and ready formula is not going to help us. You need to formulate a formula which is actually based on a scientific manner. And children are the most vulnerable category here, something that you have to remember here. And we need to receive oxygen allocation. We are in the stage 2, that's the stage 3. Are we prepared for stage 3? And you need to work out the modalities of mode distribution. So these are some of the important articles, the important news items regarding the first news item that appeared in, which asked for an oxygen audit. And the next important article that came here is regarding the oxygen, because these days the most important headlines are only on oxygen. So definitely you have to learn a lot of things. There are few small things that we need to learn. So we talk about, there is a news item which talk about oxy-saturation. So that is something that we're going to discuss, which is called as an oxy-saturation. Very, very important. Oxy-saturation of 92 or 93 must not be critical. So here the official statistics talks about a percentage called as 94%. Because if your oxygen level is somewhere between 94% or below, it says that 94% or below that, you say that you don't have to worry, you have to immediately get medical assistance. That is the level which the official statistics says. If you're not 94% or less than that, you have to take an assistance. And the article also highlights an important topic called as don't deprive oxygen. That's a key message that is being given. Don't deprive oxygen for people who need it. Very important. A lot of people need oxygen. And so what happens is people who are 94 or above, or people who are very safe people, what they do is they save a lot of oxygen cylinders for themselves, depriving people who are in the range of say 80 to 90 and below that, and who are facing actually a clinical emergency. People who are actually in a clinical emergency are deprived of oxygen because a lot of people are doing this. So this is an important awareness message that this article talks about. Keeping in mind 94, you have to save a lot of oxygen. Take only when you need that. And it also talks about the important aspects of especially the important aspects of COVID, because when you are struck with COVID, the important thing is your lungs needs a lot of oxygen, because your oxygen, you need to have oxygen supply to all parts of your body, which is hampered by the virus, which is actually hampered by this COVID. So you need to have good supply of oxygen to have a good, perfectly working lung. Your lung capacity should also be good. So that are the key issues which they discuss in this important article. So I think let's quickly take a look at this. So they talk about misuse of oxygen cylinders as a serious matter of concern, and they discuss about all this patient. So misuse of oxygen should not be there, and if it is 94%, it means there is sufficient oxygen in your body. So don't worry. So that is a message that they just gave here. And don't deprive someone's oxygen who was actually in the age below, in the range of 80 to 90. Don't deprive them the oxygen. That is something that they have discussed. And oxygen is crucial, and these are some of the important points that they does. It's very crucial, and the most important problem is the breathing, and the symptoms is you need to get the supply of oxygen to all parts of the body, and COVID really hampers that. And if the saturation is 94 or lower, the patient needs treated quickly. And according to WHO, if the saturation is less than 90%, definitely it is a clinical emergency. So in short, These are the important news items that were actually discussed in this. So please take a close look at this. So this article discussed about all these aspects of oxygen saturation. Yes, now one of the most important news item of the day, we have a news called Supreme Court declines Election Commission's plea to restrain media reports. So you have multiple articles coming in Indian Express and multiple article coming in Hindu and many other important newspaper. They all talk about an important issue because we have Supreme Court. This can be a very important questions for polity because you have a polity, law, a governance question. You need to know all these items because here the Supreme Court of India is involved, the Madras High Court, the High Court of Madras is involved, and the Election Commission of India is also involved. That means constitutional bodies are involved in this tussle. And basically, three important people are involved in this. We need to decode the issue. What are they basically talking about? And in this regard, I think we'll take a close look at Madras High Court remarks were harsh, free speech, open court key to citizens' right to know. So all these are the important news items. So let's decode this one by one. So let's quickly know what are the issues here. The issue is simple because first this was the Election Commission versus Madras High Court. That was the most important thing to be noted in the beginning. The Madras High Court, initially Election Commission of India, because Madras High Court gave a verdict which called Election Commission or the poll body and the officers, and they were even charged with murder. The Election Commission of India and the poll body officers representing them were charged with murder for creating a, because the rallies and gatherings in Tamil Nadu became very violent. So especially, and they also cited elections as one of the important reasons which created the surge in COVID, and even charged the poll officials and the people relating to election officials with murder. And they even said the election commission is responsible for the increase in COVID. So this was an important argument which Madras High Court made, and the election commission obviously challenged it. And in the scene, Supreme Court of India intervened or interfered in the scene. So this is an important thing to be noted. Supreme Court of India interfered or intervened at this point. And here Election Commission, you can clearly know that the Election Commission had grievance against the Madras High Court, the High Court, and they also made a small claim that the media should refrain. That's an important thing. The media should refrain from recording or telecasting the court proceedings. Very, very important. Now we are going to, this also has an important implication, what we called as an open court system. We need to also discuss about the open court system. And according to the Election Commission, media should refrain from recording or telecasting the court proceedings. And now you know that people, many examples have come that people have started seeing live telecast. People have started seeing the court proceedings. People are able to see the how the verdicts are created, how the structure of judiciary is actually working, what are the arguments made by the defense and the counsel. So people of India, our citizens, are getting an opportunity to watch such thing. And refraining this right is actually a violation of fundamental rights and freedom of speech. That's an important statement which Supreme Court said you cannot refrain that because that is a freedom of speech and that is an extended right. This is what Supreme Court said in this regard. So let's take a close look at it. So this article talks about basically Election Commission versus the Madras High Court, and the Supreme Court, Madras High Court actually called Election Commission and charged the poll body official with murder and called them as responsible for increase in COVID in this country. So Supreme Court said and even warned the High Court judges that this is how Supreme Court came in rescue of Election Commission, and they said that this should not be done. You should not use such words. Maybe the COVID situation has escalated, but that doesn't make Election Commission of India culpable. That doesn't make Election Commission culpable. So you should be very cautious. Supreme Court said the High Court should be very cautious in making statements, especially in the open court. You should be very, very cautious regarding while you make the open statements like this. And also, Supreme Court said media and the people's, it is the people's right to watch proceedings. So that is a free speech. So this is the tussle which involves Supreme Court, Madras High Court and Election Commission. And Supreme Court said you need to have a fine balance. That is a governance issue here, because we have the Supreme Court, we have the Election Commission and the High Court, all which are constitutional bodies and constitutionally which have got recognition. So you need to have a fine balance between Supreme Court, High Court, Election Commission, etc. So this was the important news item that appeared in this regard. And I think let's quickly take an idea about what are the most important things. The Madras High Court angle. It clearly says about this. The High Court judges as a poll body official should be charged with murder, which we discussed. And according to the judges, the EC was solely responsible for the COVID surge. And the apex court, Supreme Court said, caution, I said, caution in the words that you use, and have a delicate balance between High Court, ECI, because all these are constitutional authorities. And the court's observations were very harsh and the metaphors were inappropriate. This is what Supreme Court said about the High Court's verdict. And even the High Court said it did not seek to attribute culpability. So that was the culpability angle that I just discussed here. So I think this is an important topic that they talked about. And next is regarding the free speech. They talk about free speech because I was telling about the concept of free speech. You cannot refrain the media, because media is important, because people should watch. People should definitely watch, and they should know the structure of how the verdicts are being framed, how the verdicts work in India. And they even said, Supreme Court even asked the High Courts to watch the language, because that is very, very important. Because when you make a verdict or when you say something, especially in governance, the language can be highly misinterpreted. That is the article summary which talks about. So be very careful about the language that you use. So now let's take the key important provisions that they talk about. And these are the most. The language is something that you should very clearly use, because the language is an important instrument of judicial process. And the Election Commission request turned down by the Supreme Court, request to direct the media to refrain from reporting oral observations of the court. And the real-time reportage of court proceedings, including oral exchanges in courtrooms between, is a part of freedom of speech. Very, very important. The real-time reportage, that means real-time reportage of proceedings, oral exchanges are part of freedom of speech. Very, very important. They are all part of freedom of speech. So reporting, media can report. The real-time reportage of court proceedings should be done. And that is how the court said that you should give an importance to open court systems. So this is something that you should know. Open court system is important. And let's take another quick points which they make. And the court must be open in both physical and metaphorical sense, and except the media reporting should not be done. Even the Supreme Court warns that there is an exception, that such things will not be proceeded in the cases such as involving child sexual abuse or matrimonial proceedings, because of the concept called privacy. Because of the concept of privacy, the reporting of court proceedings shall not be done except for child sexual abuse and matrimonial cases for privacy. And for social media forums which provide real-time updates to wider audience, Supreme Court says that this is an extension of freedom of speech that the media possess. So this is more friendly towards the media. The Supreme Court gives a good strategy to the media and allowing them for live reporting of court proceedings. So this is a good move for media, and the citizens have right to know and what happens in the judicial process. And citing the example, Supreme Court said the Gujarat High Court had recently introduced live streaming of its proceedings in a bid to enhance public participation. So Gujarat High Court has called out the live streaming also. So what does this point clearly say? So Supreme Court has clearly taken a good step for media, and they have called it as an extended rights for media, and they have upheld the thing called as freedom of press or freedom of speech. All these are important aspects. So I think this is something that is very clear with also we talked about the Supreme Court, we talked about the Election Commission, and we talked about how the Madras High Court gave the verdict also. So the article completely talks about, so this is what I said: Supreme Court, Madras High Court, Election Commission tussle. So remember all the importance that we discussed. So all these are important for polity governance areas. And we have something very important because there is a question now. Because when we discuss an important area from the newspaper, it's always important to know the questioners. If you have a question that can be framed or an important prelims area that can be studied, we'll definitely take that. So what are the questioners that we discuss here? I've made three important questions that can come for the mains examination. You should be prepared for this question. An open court proceedings ensures that the judicial process is subjected to public scrutiny. Do you agree? Give your views. That means an open court proceedings ensures that judicial process is subjected to public scrutiny. So the question is, should you need some public scrutiny? So do you agree with this? So that means whenever you get a question, you need to clearly understand, tell about open court proceedings and how that judicial process is helping public scrutiny. That was the first important question that we marked. And then the next important question is, an open court serves an educational purpose as well as becoming a platform for citizens to know how the practical application of the law impacts upon their rights. Discuss. This can be a big question. An open court serves as an educational. So what are the key points that you'll see? The question is all about open courts and how they serve as an educational purpose and how that has become a platform for citizens to know the practical application of the law impacts upon their rights. So that means it contains a law. The open court system needs to be how that has become an educational purpose, and you talk about that larger platform. This is the larger platform, and how the larger platform is helping the citizens to know the practical application and the impact of law and the rights. So the aspect revolves around many of it revolves around important aspects, like it talks about practical implication, it talk about the law impacts, and it talk about the common citizens right, and how does that open court serves as an educational purpose. So the mains perspective is somewhat like this. And moving on to the third question, do you think open court system is crucial in maintaining transparency and accountability in the functioning of democratic institutions? How can they establish the public faith in them? Analyze. This is a question. Do you think open court system is crucial in maintaining transparency and accountability in functioning of democratic institutions? So how do you think Indian judiciary is much more maintaining transparency and accountability? So how do you think Indian judiciary is maintaining this through open court system? And how can they establish the public faith in them? Analyze the question. So I've made three important questions that can be important from this area. And I hope you'll also find answers to this. If you don't find answer, at least think what are the answers. And the next important news item that has come here in multiple news items, it came in Hindu, Indian Express, and multiple areas, is something which is called as a patent IP right waiver. It talks about an IP right waiver or the intellectual property right waiver. It talks about a concept called as IP right waiver. It's going to be very, very important. So we need to study. So what is the European Union to discuss US vaccine patent plan and US backs IP rights waiver for COVID vaccines. If they are ready to discuss it, and intellectual property waiver for COVID-19 vaccines. So a lot of news item, and this article actually talks about an IP waiver. So what do you mean by IP waiver in this regard? So what is an IP waiver? And in this what do you mean by IP waiver? The WHO has set this decision of at least thinking to make an IP waiver, intellectual property right waiver, is going to be a monumental moment. That the WHO is called this decision as the monumental moment, and I think let's find out what is this monumental moment and what you mean by IP waiver. Let's take a quick look at that. So first of all, you need to understand IP waiver. On top of that, you should know that there is WTO, or the World Trade Organization, and in this, IP waiver means, simply meaning, if this is a vaccine maker, this is a vaccine maker called X. This is a vaccine maker called X. They are the big vaccine makers and a big pharma company which knows the know-how technology of creating a vaccine. So an IP waiver, this is actually protected by a patent. So just companies know how to create the vaccine is protected by a patent. So this IP waiver here means that you need to get, when this patent, when this concept is waived, that is an important thing. When this concept is waived, that means small pharma company, this is a company called as A, and there is a company called as B, and there is a company called as C. So that means small pharma companies and vaccine makers, very important, the small pharma companies and the vaccine makers will now get the technology and the know-how to make vaccines on a large scale basis. So the whole world is suffering from the pressure of COVID, and you need vaccine across the world. And it is also an important level, citing that not only the developed countries but also the developing countries and the low income countries should also get an access to vaccine making. And what if only the big pharma companies of the developed countries, like this called as vaccine makers, called the company called X, is only making vaccines? That means the global coverage is going to be low, and we need to make that coverage to a large extent. For that, when the IP waiver, the WTO's, when you make the IP waiver, what happens is small pharma companies, small vaccine maker companies can start making vaccines on a large scale basis without entering into lawsuits. Very important. Without entering into lawsuits and no patent violation. That means in this scenario, you can create vaccines on a large scale basis, and that is the need of the hour. And that is what you mean by an IP waiver. So I think the scenario is used. That means small companies and pharma companies can now start making vaccines without entering into a lawsuit with a bigger company, because the technology and know-how is something that they already got. So this is important point to be noted. And for this, WTO is the most important. The World Trade Organization is very important. And in order to have such waiver, you need to have a full throttle discussion and approval from the WTO. And in this, you should know that United States of America has almost decided to waive that waive that IP waiver, so that large number of companies can make vaccines. So this is a monumental moment, as the WHO called it, and the European Union is also discussing this concept, only because the two countries are India and South Africa. Two countries called as India and South Africa made a request, official request, in where they made an official request in TRIPS Council. Again, this is also very important. When you learn about WTO, it's important that you know TRIPS Council. So India and South Africa made a request to the TRIPS Council. There is something called as a TRIPS Council, and in order to make this IP waiver. So all this scenario is being considered, and this has been discussed on a large scale basis. And IP waiver contains what? They discuss about you do not enter into any lawsuit. That means waive off the industrial designs and different type of know-how. Everything should be waived, so that each and every vaccine makers, pharma companies, small companies can actually make the vaccine. And this is a good thing in a larger scale, but this is also opposed by the big pharma companies of the world. The big pharma companies of the world are opposing this thing, and we should take a close look at why this has been opposed. So these are the most important things that we have discussed for IP waiver. Now I think we'll quickly move on to the important points and take a close look at what are the important points suggested. An IP protection would mean that pharmaceutical companies can make vaccines without the fear of lawsuits from the company which originally developed them. You know that? And United States supported it. That's a key point. European Union was also agreed, as I said, and India and South Africa made the request. And such a proposal is only possible if you make a WTO proposal. In this concept, there is something called as a TRIPS Council. India officially requested in the TRIPS Council. I think these important points are very clear. And the next important thing that we should note here is regarding the TRIPS Council, which we've discussed, and the 4 sections of agreements. If at all there is going to be a waiver, what are the 4 sections? It will actually have related to the copyright, industrial designs and patents, protection of undisclosed information, affordable diagnostic therapeutics and other medical products that can be used to combat the virus. So if at all there is a waiver, that is going to be on 4 important grounds, which I told you: copyright, industrial designs, patents, undisclosed information, and affordable diagnostics and therapeutics and other medical products. So these are the important areas which will have an impact on that. And next, look at the IP waiver and why they are being objected or opposed. That is a key point that we have. And a big pharma company like Pfizer, AstraZeneca opposed the waiver, saying that eliminating IP protections would undermine the global response. That will undermine the global response and will waste billions and billions of dollars that they have invested in this specified know-how industry. And how will they get the returns in the future if everybody will start making vaccines? And what is their investment is wasted. And they say that eliminating protection would not speed up protection, and they even doubt the low-income category countries and the developing countries regarding the ability of their countries to make or create more vaccines. So they doubt that the capacity of their vaccine creations. And they say that opening the IP sector or waiving will lose the control over the quality of the vaccine being created. All these are oppositions and objections which have come in this phase. So this is the important topic of what you called as an IP waiver. And now you know that why IP waiver is going to be a monumental moment. You need to know that WTO will have to ratify this, and India and South Africa are on the forefront of this. So an important topic being discussed, and in this concept, I will also tell you, we have an important section coming up here, which is called as a news leads. We have read an important area. From this area, what are the few things that you have to go and study? And obviously, the first important topic that you have to study is TRIPS. TRIPS Council is being discussed, so you have to read about TRIPS, trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights. You have to prepare this for the prelims as well as the mains. And WTO has been discussed, so know more about WTO. What are the constitution of WTO? And the article also talks about a thing called as the mRNA, which is the messenger RNA. Very, very important news leads for you to prepare for yourself. So these are the important area of what we called as an IP waiver. And again, the next important news item that appeared in the newspaper, again, as I said, oxygen is something that has been discussed, but a lot of newspaper, even the Supreme Court of India, you can also remember something called as the health governance, because it is also very important, the concept of health governance. The Supreme Court of India, everybody is saying that the Mumbai model is awesome. So what do you mean by Mumbai model? Even the Supreme Court of India said, watch the Mumbai model because it is an awesome model. So even the Hindustan Time articles talks about detailing the Mumbai model, and even the Hindu mentions about Mumbai model. Supreme Courts asks the whole states and the different authorities and organizations to look up to Mumbai model. So in this context, I thought I'll simply try to explain what do you mean by Mumbai model in a very brief manner. Let's take a look at what do you mean by Mumbai model. And basically the concept is very simple. The Mumbai model was basically created because it had access, it had good planning. I'll simply demarcate this. It has got a simply planning because large number of oxygen plants, they had good access to oxygen plants. Very, very important. They had huge access to oxygen plants, and they created a good governance systems. This is what is the Mumbai model was important. They created a governance system, and there was an oxygen plants kept on producing more number of oxygens, and there was a governance system here, and which provided better coordination. That means new different type of civic officials were appointed, like civic members, like the civic officials were appointed, so that was a better coordination between them. And this governance system made sure that there was a health report, that there was a health status. That means how much oxygen was needed as per the daily cases. There was a health status, and each and every hospitals which required oxygen was also connected through this, and the system, the governance system. So in short, it was very clear. We will actually explain it clearly. So there was an oxygen system here, proper oxygen planted, and then there was a governance system. You call it as a governance system, and the officials were appointed who were taken charge, and there was a health status, daily health status was maintained, how much oxygen was needed, and even the status reports of hospitals and the demand of oxygen was also planned, and the officers coordinated between this hospitals and the health status. So this was basically a good coordination, and even ward level teams, the ward level teams, even in the lower towns, the ward level teams were formed to assess the oxygen deficiency, and accordingly the status, you take the status of the hospitals, you have an officials who coordinate or take responsibility for the distribution of oxygen, and accordingly, and even in every hospitals after that they started having separate plans. So that means more oxygen can flow, and it created a sustainable distribution system. This is what is called as a Mumbai model, which the whole Supreme Court of India is also asking. So that means having a large sufficient oxygen plant, creating good level officers, civic officers who are responsible, who are tracking the hospital demand, who are tracking a status demands of the daily COVID cases, and responding with ward level members. And this whole great model is what is called as a Mumbai model. This is what Supreme Court even asked the other states to follow. So let's quickly take a look at the important points that they talk about, and let's see. It's no single death in want of oxygen. We should not have a single death due to oxygen. And they asked the center and Delhi to follow this. They installed 15 liquid medical oxygen LMO tanks with capacity of 13 kiloliters and up to 11 to 6 kiloliters each, small and big kiloliters LMO plants. And officials were acted as coordinators, and the municipal commissioners were related to 26 civic wards. All of them were closely connected for the distribution of the oxygen. And then the important thing was, take a look at this, the ward level teams which we discussed, and this civic body now plans to construct oxygen generation plants at each hospital. So, and there was also a resource inventory of oxygen units. So all these are, in short, are what is called as a Mumbai model. So this is also in the news. So these are some of the important aspects about Mumbai model. Moving on to the next important article was regarding the Anamalai tribes, and this appeared for Anamalai tribes. It's still an urban blight, because the article talks about the impact of COVID and how the small area is actually recovering and how they're affected. So whenever you get such questions, so Anamalai tribal is also known for Anamalai Tiger Reserve. Very, very important. The Anamalai Tiger Reserve is also very, very important, as you can just see. And you know, when you prepare for UPSC Civil Services examination for prelims, you know, wildlife parks, sanctuaries, national parks, biosphere reserves, and tiger reserves, all these are important areas you need to know, because you need to know, they might ask you match the following questions in the preliminary examination, or they might ask you or give you an important background about a national park, or the important animals or the flora or the fauna which is found, and then they'll ask you the above description fits which of the national parks or tiger reserves in India. So it's always important. Such areas are very, very important areas for UPSC Civil Service examination. So whenever you get a national park, sanctuary, or a tiger reserve, you need to find out few things. Where is it located? What is the most important flora and the fauna found, and the related aspects of that. So we'll do that quickly in this also. And let's find out. So this is Anamalai Tiger Reserve. Previously it was called as the Indira Gandhi National Park and Wildlife Sanctuary, because previously Indira Gandhi visited this, and for this it was named after that. So let's take a look at what you can find out here. Where is it located? So that is the most important. The Annamalai Tiger Reserve, which is known by Indira Gandhi Wildlife Sanctuary and National Park, is located in the Annamalai Hills of Pollachi and Valpara Taluk of Coimbatore. So that means you can remember that most often you can find this is in Coimbatore district, Coimbatore in Tamil Nadu. You can find Coimbatore in Tamil Nadu, so Pollachi. Annamalai Hills is very important. Geography is very important. And it lies south of the Palakkad Gap in southern Western Ghats. So always remember that this is a national park. You should always know what is the geography, what comes south of this, and where is this national park located. That location is very, very important. So geographical sense is very important. And the park is sanctuary is under the consideration of UNESCO and Western Ghats World Heritage Site. So this is all part of that. So know the location. Where is it located? So that is important here. And moving on again, which makes it important, the forest. They talks about the tiger reserve. You should know about the tiger reserves. How many tiger reserves are there in India? Why is an area reserved as a tiger reserve? What is the difference between a tiger reserve and a wildlife sanctuary? And what is the difference between wildlife sanctuary and a national park? What is the difference between a biosphere reserve and a national park? You should be able to find out the differences between all this also. So in Annamalai Tiger Reserve, you have 5 different type of forests. As you can just see, they talk about the 5 different type of forest. And studying about the forest is very important. Very, very important topic for your geography also. When you learn geography, especially, you should have an idea. So we have the tropical evergreen forest, semi-evergreen forest, grassland vegetation, moist deciduous forest, and montane green shola forest. So also understand the forest that we are talking is in southern part of India. So you should know what are the type of most probable type of forests that you'll have in southern India. What are the most probable forests that you'll have in the northeastern part of India, the western part of India. So that means geographical clarity is very, very clear. So there are 5 type of forests being discussed here. And now I think we'll move on. So there is understand that there is a very famous Trimurti temple in the Annamalai forest. And the Amaravati crocodile farm, if you get a match the following, the Amaravati crocodile farm, the big crocodile farm is in the Annamalai Tiger Reserve, and we have the top slip. The place is called the top slip, and the Chinnakallar, the Nallamudi viewpoint, the Monkey Falls, and the Aliyar Dam. They are all big parts. The Chinnakallar and the Nallamudi, Monkey Falls, and Aliyar Dam are all part of this Annamalai Tiger Reserve. So very, very important. And important here, you have a news lead for civil services this year. You should know what are biosphere reserves, wildlife sanctuary, national parks. What is the difference between each and everybody of that? And what is Wildlife Protection Act 1972? Because they are talking about that. That is something, the news leads that we have to pick up from this area to study for the prelims. Because normally it's like that. You have a topic. Mainly the Annamalai Tiger Reserve is a topic. And in that you have National Tiger Conservation Authority is being discussed. Wildlife Protection Act is being discussed. A sanctuary, a biosphere reserve is being discussed. So that means you should know about all the important aspects also. That is how you create that awareness. So one topic can lead you to many other topics. So prepare that for the prelims as well as mains examination. Let's take a look at the next important articles which came in many articles, Financial Express, Indian Express, Hindu, is regarding the concept of Resolution Framework 2.0 by RBI. What is a Resolution Framework 2.0? So that means they talk about RF 2.0. You need to find out what do you mean by RBI's Resolution Framework 2.0. So previously there was also something called as version 1.0. So in this concept, RBI not to provide moratorium but restructuring, the very, very important. So what is being discussed here? What do you mean by Resolution Framework 2.0? You need to find out this quickly. Let's take a close look at it and let's discuss. They talk about Resolution 2.0. That means the whole world is reeling under the pandemic. So the money flow is also a big time issue. That is something that we discussed here. The whole world is talking about the pandemic. The money flow is also very important. And what happens about small businesses? This is a business hub. This is a small medium. This is a medium business called B. This is a individual investor called C. So all these people have actually taken money from the bank. That is the clean cut here. All the people who have taken money from the bank, these people have taken money from the bank. A, B, C have taken money from the bank, and A, B, and C have to repay the loans that they have taken back to the bank. They have to give the loans, and you know that for that you have the EMI. That means equated monthly installment. Every month you have to pay your EMI. That means A, B, C, the different business houses, small, medium, they have to pay back the money to the bank. And in the wake of the pandemic, due to the pandemic, lockdowns, many of the businesses have shut. They don't have businesses running. That means there is a problem in giving back the money to the bank. This is a simple, and that is the reason why in the last lockdown, the RBI, they created something called as a resolution framework 1.0, in which what the bank did, the bank, so I think this is clear. That means you have to pay back the money to the bank. You have to pay the money back to the bank. So that means last time they gave a lot of moratoriums. That means say resolution framework 1.0 gave moratoriums up to 1 or 2 years. That means you don't have to pay certain amount of installments to the bank. That means since you don't have the business in the pandemic, you can wait. That is the relief that the RBI gave to a lot of people. And now in the wake of the pandemic, the second wave, we say that you need to, the framework 2.0, they say that we are not giving more moratoriums, but definitely we are trying to restructure the loan. That is the word. We are trying to restructure the loan. That means we are going to revise the payment schedule. The payment schedule to the bank will be revised and the loans will be restructured. So that means it's a combination. And who can apply? People who took the resolution 1 framework can also apply this time for 2. And people who are new or did not apply in resolution 1 can also apply in 2. That means who have already applied can also apply 2. Who did not apply in 1 can also apply in 2. So this is basically the concept. That means previously the framework system works on moratorium and restructuring or revising the payment schedule that a business house or a business vendor needs to pay back to the bank. You need to pay back to the bank. That money, that repayment can be curtailed for some time. So this is what you mean by resolution framework. And for a quick analysis, we need to take the quick points and see what are the important things that they talk about this. And this offers an interim liquidity relief to a lot of companies. Companies with weaker credit profiles and low resilience sectors are expected to benefit from the scheme. And RBI announced several measures to help citizens, small business, healthcare providers, vaccine makers to tackle the second wave of pandemic, and will allow banks to offer moratorium or revised loan payments. So that is the key resolution framework. You either get a moratorium or you get a revised payment schedule. That means this is the bank, and this is the bank. You need to pay a certain amount of money to the bank every year for the loan that you have taken. Either you don't pay the loan or else you get a revised payment schedule. That is the key important thing that they talk about in this. And they also talk other important aspects like individuals who have availed a loan with aggregate exposure of less than 25 crores. People who have taken loans with less than 25 crores are eligible to go for framework 2.0, and people who have not taken in 1.0 can also take 2.0, and the moratorium as usual will be available and restructuring the loans. So basically they talk about moratorium and restructuring of the loans. The repayment scheduling. Repayment schedule is different. So this is basically what is called the RBI's resolution framework, and there is 1.0 and 2.0. I think this is clear. So this is an important item which is actually there in the newspaper. The next important news item is regarding the China halts economic dialogue with Australia. That means it is a clean case of China versus Australia in the international diplomatic canvas. China versus Australia. And there is something called as China Australia SED, which has been terminated, which means strategic, economic, and dialogue. This has been suspended for some time. That means China and Australia are having a very bad time. What are the reasons for that? Let's quickly find out in this important article. So let's find out. So China and Australia are having a very bad time. As you can just see, the China Australia said SED's strategic economic dialogue is being suspended for some time, and they're having a very bad results because the trade between China, because Australia, China is one of the single largest participant or trade partner of Australia. That trade has come to a halt. Many things, that means you have more embargoes. What do you mean by embargoes? There are more tariffs. There are more tariffs coming in. That means the trade is severely affected between China and Australia. And some of the reasons which they say are, it ranges from human rights and human rights, espionage, trade related issues. But the most important reason being Canberra recently questioned the origin of pandemic, the origin of this pandemic to China. And that was a kind of an insult which Chinese government took, because Canberra tried to create the origin of the pandemic to China. And the latest and the immediate trigger is that in the Australia's 5G network trials, because the whole world is gearing up for 5G network trials, the Chinese company, the huge company Huawei, was actually excluded from the trial. So Chinese company was excluded from the 5G network trial of Australia. That was the immediate trigger of this China versus Australian issue. And that created in what? Trade problems. That means the trade problem, lot of Australia being the single largest partner of, and they have a trade problem, and regarding the lot of exports, everything is being affected. And that is what I said, let's take a close look at and find out what are the important areas quickly to understand. And it's a symbolic act of wide range of issues like human rights, espionage, and origin of COVID-19. And the Canberra called as they traced the origin of the pandemic to China, and they banned the telecom giant Huawei from 5G network trials. That is the important thing. And the biggest trading partner, China is the biggest trading partner of Australia, has already imposed tariffs, disrupted dozens of key industries, including wine, barley, coal, completely destroying exports. That is something that you need to know at this point. And next is the attitude that they said the China-Australia strategic economic dialogue was pulled based on the current attitude of the Australian government. Beijing will indefinitely suspend all activities under the framework of this agreement. So this is China versus Australia, the recent issue that is being flared up in the international world. And the next important news item that has been discussed is the controversial Prevention of Terrorism Act, the PTA, and the Sri Lankan issue, because the long detention of a Sri Lankan lawyer poet sparked concern in Sri Lanka, because since long time this article, international relations article about Sri Lanka, did discuss something about the concept of PTA and how this South African style apartheid law, which discriminates minorities in Sri Lanka, has been in the news. So PTA means controversial. It means the Prevention of Terrorism Act, PTA, and the article talks about how Sri Lanka uses this. And we need to discuss something very quickly about the few aspects of this, and let's see what are the important aspects that we need to discuss about this. The Sri Lankan PTA, a lot of people have been arrested. And you should know the PTA is very, very similar to the South Africa's apartheid law. Very, very similar to the South African apartheid law, and the same law which is similar to the British law, which British government made to handle or tackle the Irish militancy. The British law which they used against the Irish militancy, and the apartheid law, which is very similar to this Terrorism Act. It's very similar to that law. And actually it was created in 1979 under the President Jayawardene's time. And since on, the minority clashes and the minority affairs is a big, big issue in the Sri Lanka. So minority issues. So all this is in the future. Whenever you read a newspaper article regarding the PTA, you have to understand that this is an act which is as popular from 1979, and it became permanent law in 1982 and has not spared any ethnic group. So all these are important things that you should understand from this concept. And I think now we can quickly find out the most important aspects of some of the Prevention of Terrorism Act, that is the PTA. it's been almost been 40 years terrorism law, the anti-terrorism law, and it is modeled on South Africa's apartheid era legislation and the British laws used against Irish militancy. This was created in Sri Lanka in 1979 under the tenure of Jayawardene, and he mainly used it to suppress the Tamil youth's struggle against the straight discrimination. So PTA is an international topic, very popular in Sri Lanka. So Sri Lanka is talking about this. Another interesting aspect to be noted in the newspaper is what you see as the Facebook's oversight board. What do you mean by an oversight board? FB is actually coming out. You have articles in different newspapers, so they talk about oversight board. What do you mean by an oversight board, and what is the main function of that? So all these are the important. The most important thing that you can right away associate this as with this important point regarding the Facebook oversight board. The most key attention that the international media got about this board is Donald Trump, because Donald Trump was put was the profile of Donald Trump was put on an indefinite hold. That is the key word. They have that was actually put on an indefinite hold. And why do you have this Facebook oversight board? What is the main duty for this? And is this an independent body? So Facebook oversight board is actually an independent body which will decide what will be there in Facebook, what is something that is allowed on Facebook, and what is something that is not allowed on Facebook and that should be removed from Facebook. That is that Facebook's oversight board is an independent body with a lot of people who are going to do a lot of activities relating, especially when it comes to the freedom of speech. The freedom of speech is concerned in Facebook. Facebook oversight board is going to be an important body in that. So a lot of people's comments have been removed. A lot of people have accounts have been suspended. Now we see that a lot of accounts have been suspended. What is the criteria of suspension? What is the criteria of a permanent ban? And now there is an indefinite hold. Trump's profile has been put on an indefinite hold because of many activities and many statements done by Donald Trump. And it is a statement said by Mark Zuckerberg that I've increasingly come to believe that Facebook should not make so many important decisions about a free expression and safety on our own. And for that, you need a board. And that board is called as Facebook Oversight Board. So that means it is an independent regulator. And let's see, how is this working? Let's take a close look at it. And indefinitely, Donald Trump was indefinitely blocked for using the platform. And the oversight board has been set up as an independent body that, as I said, will help Facebook figure out what content can be allowed and what ought to be removed. So what is allowed? That is a key point. What is the content that is allowed and what is the content that should be removed? So this is an independent body, and the Donald Trump's issue makes this oversight board very, very popular. And I'll tell you a important person here, and this is Harvard professor Noah Feldman, who gave a phenomenal idea to Facebook that Facebook should also need something like a Supreme Court. The Facebook should also need something like a Supreme Court when it comes to freedom of speech. Freedom of speech, that is something that should be noted. And the present situation, why is the present situation, is because Donald Trump has been posted on an indefinite block. He's been posted on an indefinite block, and previously Facebook could do what? Facebook could remove the content, Facebook could suspend the account for some time, or Facebook could give a permanent ban. They have not indefinitely blocked is not something. So that is the reason why Donald Trump, since he was indefinitely blocked, which does not come in the policy of the Facebook, this matter appeared in the oversight board, and the oversight board asked Facebook to come up with an explanation for this. That means, as Noah Feldman said, this is going to be a Supreme Court where freedom of speech is concerned as far as the Facebook is concerned. So this is what is related to. Let's take the close important points relating to this. Noah Feldman was a 50-year professor on Harvard. He said, you need a Supreme Court-like thing to decide freedom of speech as far as the Facebook is concerned. And you see, indeterminate and standardless penalty of indefinite suspension is something new. Either Facebook removes the content, suspends the user for some time, or give a permanent ban, but indefinite suspensions aren't part of response mix, so that has been flagged. So this issue of Donald Trump makes Facebook Oversight Board very popular. So you should know what you mean by Facebook Oversight Board. And the issue of Donald Trump is the latest issue which Oversight Board talks about. And this board, please don't forget, is an independent board. And the last important news item of today's newspaper analysis is Russia approves one dose Sputnik Light. So Russia has authorized something called as Sputnik Light. So Sputnik is very popular. And in this regard, let's find out what are the important areas and important concepts regarding Sputnik Light. And they have authorized Sputnik Light. It's a single dose vaccine against COVID-19. And the Sovereign Wealth Fund, Russian Direct Investment Fund, the RDI, the Russian Direct Investment Fund is the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Russia, which it invests. So the move will pay for the immunization of a larger number. So RDIF is important. And Sputnik Light is the first component, the recombinant human adenovirus serotype, number 26 RAD26. This is, please, important. This is very important. This is the 26 RAD26 of Sputnik 5 vaccine that has been approved by over 60 countries, including India. So Sputnik Light is the first component of the recombinant human adenovirus serotype, number 26, or the RAD26. And very, very important in this regard. And even it has not been approved by European Medicine Agency, United States Food Drug Administration, the FDA or the EMA hasn't approved this Sputnik Light, because the Sputnik 5 vaccine has been approved over by 60 countries, and this is actually a Sputnik Light version. And many countries have been wary of, people don't like, because Sputnik 5, as you know, is named after the Soviet satellite. If you haven't heard about Sputnik, Sputnik is named after a satellite. So that is the important news that you should know. So Russia approves something called as Sputnik Light. So this is an important current affair item that appeared in the news items. So we have come to the end of, we have discussed so many articles and important news items which came in today's newspaper. And I think I've given you a fair good idea about current affairs analysis and what are the things. I've given you news leads and I've given you questions also to prepare. And keep watching LearnStroke for more such current affairs analysis on the newspaper. So keep watching. This is Arjun R. Shaankar.